Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Arabiya English. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up on today's programme, we bring you all the latest from Gaza, where it's been another deadly 24 hours, with 89 Palestinians reported to have been killed. We'll be speaking to those working on the ground on the growing humanitarian crisis. Plus, European leaders are warning against any redrawing of Ukraine's borders in any peace deal with Russia. This just days ahead of a high-stakes summit in Alaska between President Putin and President Trump. All of that to come on GNT. Hello and thank you for joining us. It's all eyes on Gaza as the death toll continues to rise and global outrage continues to grow. Well, in a matter of just 24 hours, at least 89 Palestinians are reported to have been killed there. Well, international pressure on Israel is continuing to grow following the deadly attacks on journalists and also its expanded military operations in the Gaza Strip. Well, Saudi Arabia's cabinet, meeting today in Neom under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, accused Israel of committing ethnic cleansing against the Palestinians. Well, the UN has also condemned Israel's recent actions. Meanwhile, Norway's $2 trillion wealth fund is also divesting away from Israeli firms as a result of the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Dr Mohammed Abu Mughisib, who is the Deputy Medical Coordinator for Médecins Sans Frontières in the Gaza Strip. He joins us from the Mawasi area. Dr Mughisib, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. I mean, we heard reports of more deadly bombardment in eastern areas of Gaza City overnight. Just tell us what the latest has been in the last 24 hours.
First of all, thank you for having me. I mean, the airstrike and bombard didn't stop. I mean, since the beginning actually of the war. I mean, it's a daily incident, daily event. But yesterday was very heavy in Khan Yunis area. I mean, there was heavy airstrikes in Khan Yunis. I mean, in Gaza City in the north. I mean, the Gaza City itself. I mean, speaking to you now, I mean, the hospitals which are functioning now in Gaza, the bed occupancy, I mean, there is no more beds for patients at all. I mean, now the patients are lying in the corridors and the floor in the emergency department because there is no space for the injured anymore in all the hospitals, whatever is structured hospitals for the Ministry of Health or the field hospitals which are run by the international NGOs.
Okay, and of course, we've been covering this story, consistently here at Al Arabiya, and it's been reported that more than 60,000 Palestinians have been killed during these last 22 months. We hear that more children are dying of starvation and malnutrition in the last 24 hours. Just tell us, what's the latest with regards to access to food at this particular moment?
I mean, since the last few days, there was some aids entering into Gaza. But actually, I mean, this is not really proper food. First of all, the number of trucks which are entering or the aids are not enough. You know that Gaza needs at least 500 trucks of goods entering every day. And now around 20 trucks entering. This is it's just a drop, actually. And the material that is entering is not a proper nutrition. I mean, it's only flour, cooking oil, and rice and pasta. I mean, what is missing is the proteins, the milk, which is not entering, the fruits. So, I mean, still there is a huge acute hunger in Gaza. I mean, the trucks which are entering they are looted as well by some gangsters in here in Gaza or by the population who are in deep hunger. So still the markets are semi-empty. The prices are high, and still we are seeing malnutrition cases. I mean, among the young children, among the pregnant women, lactating women, elderly, even normal people like us. I mean, we are still having one meal per day.
Sure. I mean, I was going to say, we're being told that 1/3 of Gaza's population has now gone several days without eating anything at all. I mean, are you getting the impression things are getting worse by the day, or have things remained pretty consistent, would you say, in the last week or two?
I mean, there is little bit improvement in you can see, I mean, sugar you can see now in the market, you can see rice in the market, you can see flour in the market. But again, I mean, not everyone can access to buy it. I mean, people, the poverty is high. There is good signs that some charity kitchens started to work again, but as well still, I mean, it's not the proper nutrition. I mean, again, I mean, you need for normal people, normal nutrition. I mean, you need protein, you need the vitamins. This is not available in the goods which are entering in Gaza until now.
So what does that mean? Does that mean that hunger and famine are perhaps averted, but that doesn't mean that malnutrition is being averted? Is that roughly where we are?
I mean, we were on the edge of famine. I mean, it was almost a few, days, and we had to declare famine in Gaza. I mean, with the entry of a few goods, I mean, we are a little bit not far from declaring, but the malnutrition didn't end. I mean, still, I mean, there is, I mean, what you see in for example, the children. I mean, there is children dying from malnutrition, and yes, they have underlying disease, but doesn't mean that, I mean, if they have underlying disease, they shouldn't die. I mean, they have to have special protein, special formula milk, which is not entering. And there is some accusation that no, they have underlying disease, they have some comorbidity, genetic problem. Yes, but they were not supposed to die. I mean, if the goods are entering, formula milk entering, special nutrition are entering, these children will not die even in the hospital.
You're a specialist in mental health care as well as being a practicing doctor. Just tell us how widespread mental health issues are there in Gaza, and what sort of mental health issues we're talking about. Are we talking about trauma? Are we talking about depression? Tell us a bit about that aspect.
I mean, in what I can say to you, I can confirm to you that the 2 million people in Gaza have psychological problems already. I mean, I cannot say which term. I mean, we have to really create, all the mental health experts need to create a special term for the Gaza syndrome. I mean, they have mixed anxiety with trauma, with depression, with panic, with insomnia. I mean, all of this are people are witnessing and having all the time. So we really need to find a way to create really a new term for Gaza in mental health. The situation is really bad. People are living since already 22 months of continuous bombarding. They are displaced from their homes several times. They lost friends, members of their families. They are starving. I mean, all of this each person in Gaza has suffered, whatever is a child until elderly.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, Dr. Mughisib, I mean, not to mention the fear of living in tents and having explosions going off around you, seeing horrific scenes every day, seeing fellow human beings maimed or dead, perhaps on a regular basis. I mean, what's that going to do, particularly to children, in the long term?
I mean, first of all, we hope that there will be an end of this war. And then later, I mean, we will need decades really to work on the psychological impact that the population had, and especially children. I mean, children had some of them has been born in the war, raised in this war, and nothing they know in the last 22 months except the bombing, the airstrikes, the starvation themselves. They are asking for bread. I mean, in Gaza, we never witnessed children asking for bread in the street. I mean, so I think the expert of mental health, need to really work on supporting the population after the ceasefire.
And just before we move on, I mean, there aren't any educational facilities functioning, are there? I mean, it's being reported 97% of schools have been destroyed. So presumably, the daily reality for a child in Gaza is a battle to survive.
As you mentioned, Tom, I mean, there is no kindergarten, there is no schools, there is no university, there is no education since 2 years. I mean, there is no one is going to, I mean, even online, there is no a way to do online even studies. I mean, with the present condition, people living in tents, and there is no internet in some huge areas. So, I mean, the children here, they are standing in queues to bring water, to fill their jerrycans of water. They are standing in queues in the charity of these kitchen charities to get some food. I mean, this is what they are now raising. I mean, so I mean, the entire population has been really destroyed socially and psychologically.
I mean, Israel continues to dispute a lot of the facts that come from the ground in Gaza. They dispute the fact that there have been malnutrition fatalities. They deny, some of the ones we speak to, that there is any shortage of food. I mean, what do you say to those kinds of denials?
I mean, first of all, about the children who are dying from starvation. I mean, they mentioned that these patients are having some diseases, genetical diseases or other cardiac diseases. Yes, they have another disease, and they need special formula, milk, or special protein supplement. That doesn't mean that they have to die. No, I mean, they are dying because there is nothing entering, and this protein and this formula milk is not entering. Israel is blocking it to enter, so that's why they are dying. I mean, yes, they have comorbidity, so they're not supposed to die. Regarding, I mean, the foods, I mean, you can come to the market. I mean, allow the people to see the market. There is no fruits entering. There is no protein. I mean, there is no eggs. There is no milk. I mean, what is entering in the last few days? Few trucks of flour, cooking oil, pasta, rice. That's what is entering, and sugar.
What about you personally? I mean, what sort of access to food do you have? And have you found that your weight has decreased sharply in the last few months?
I mean, everyone, it's not me. I mean, everyone who in Gaza lost weight. I mean, there is nothing in the market to buy. I mean, it's not that we cannot afford it. No, there is nothing in the market to buy. So, I mean, now I'm eating one meal. I mean, and my colleagues are eating one meal per day, and we are lucky to have this one meal. I mean, but this is not even a proper nutrition. I mean, we're having rice, pasta. Now we have sugar with the tea. I mean, we can have little bit sugar to have little bit calories, but it's not a healthy food at all. I mean, you don't have proteins, you don't have eggs, you don't have cheese, you don't have fruits. I mean, it's since March.
And all the while, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation continues to operate. It's been described by Human Rights Watch as being a death trap for people who go to those sites to collect their food, because there have been reported shootings, deadly shootings at their sites. I mean, is the GHF, as it's called, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, is it getting more effective at distributing aid, or is it remaining as deadly and as dangerous as it was before for people who go there to collect food?
I mean, until today, I mean, there is people dying from gunshot injuries in the distribution points. I mean, since the beginning, since the GHF opened, I mean, it was not, I mean, they opened 4 sites. I mean, before it was 400 sites run by the UN to distribute for the population. Now it's four is not enough for the population. There is no organization. It's humiliation. I mean, you saw on the TV, I mean, how the people are gathered there, and I mean, in a special area. They have to walk, and then they are going early, and they are shot. If they go at the time, they are shot, and if they go late, they are shot. So we had a lot of patients that we received in our facilities, in our clinics, in our hospital, who have been shot and injured by during their trip to the GHF to collect food and parcels of food.
So can you be sure, Doctor, that the people who've been shot at GHF food distribution points have been shot by Israeli gunfire and not by saboteurs or other militants in the area?
I mean, from the patients that we treated, I mean, they were clear saying that they were shot from the side of the Israeli side. The shooting came. I mean, the warning bullets or the shooting. And I mean, there was as well some people who were working with GHF, I mean, that said it clearly.
Are the aerial food drops making any difference to the situation there? There have been some countries that have delivered food from the air to Gaza. Is that helping at all?
I mean, airdrops were meant for, areas, rural areas and remote areas where there is, mountain people living in a remote area in the mountains or in the Sahara. You can drop for them food, or aids. I mean, here the population is 2 million people who are squeezed in 25% of Gaza Strip, which is actually a small area already. All of them squeezed. There is tents everywhere. When you look from the window, you have tents everywhere, people and IDBs. And dropping it, I mean, it's killing people. I mean, it's not really the way that aids. I mean, there is a way, there was a system. I mean, there is terminals, I mean, in between Gaza and Egypt and Israel, that through these terminals, trucks can enter and can deliver. And it was the system was running.
Sure, and we've seen pictures of people being injured or killed by parcels of food coming from the sky. It's, as you say, it's extremely dangerous. You touched on there on what sounds like a quick fix in terms of opening the Rafah border crossing between Egypt and Gaza. Is that something you think is likely to happen?
I mean, we hope so. I mean, because I mean, trucks are standing in queues on the Egyptian side, and I mean, they need just the permission from the Israeli side to enter and to deliver aids. I mean, a lot of international NGOs, among them us, MSF, we have aids and trucks that are waiting on the Egyptian side. So, I mean, that will be the easiest solution to bring aid in Gaza is bringing it through the terminals, like between Rafah terminal or other terminals that are in the north or the east of Gaza.
Yeah, and of course the aid that's sitting on the border there in Egypt, for example, it's not Israel's aid, it's aid that's being donated by, the international community. But Israel nevertheless says it's very worried about that aid being stolen by Hamas. Why is Israel so worried about that, do you think? And what difference does it make if Hamas steals some of the aid anyway?
I mean, now the population don't care who will steal it. I mean, they need that aids to enter Gaza. Even if the devil will steal the trucks, at least the devil will distribute the aids to the population. I mean, the population are desperate. I mean, since March, nothing was entering, so they don't care who will distribute the aid, and they need just the aid to enter, and that's it. I mean, there is gangsters there is looting, there is, I don't know, several stories. But at least there was aids in the market. I mean, there was products in the market that the population were able to access.
Right, and if all of that food got through, it would bring prices down in the market, and it would make Hamas less powerful in a way, if indeed it is reselling some of the food on the black market at much higher prices. That would no longer be a tool at the disposal of Hamas, would it?
I mean, that's the logic, Tom. I mean, if there was a lot of goods entering to Gaza, I mean, the prices will be very low and no one will have to use the black market anymore.
I just want to ask you, I mean, over the course of these last 22 months, is there one encounter or one person that you've met or one situation you found yourself in that you're simply never going to forget? I'm sure you've had several, but is there one that stands out for you?
I mean, when my family actually left Gaza, I mean, my family managed to leave Gaza to Egypt, and that was a moment that I will never forget. I mean, all my family, my wife and my kids managed to escape this, massacre here in Gaza, and now they are safe in Egypt since February. The moment that I said goodbye to them, it was really the moment that I will always remember, because I tried to leave after this, but then Rafah terminal has closed in May. And since that, I'm waiting since 1.5 years. If the borders will open again, Rafah will open, I will try to reach them and join them.
Right, so you're saying you would leave as soon as you could, were the opportunity made available to you.
Yes.
What about a patient you've met, a child, a mother, someone you've met whose story and whose ordeal is one that's going to be in your mind forever?
I mean, a girl of 6 years old, I mean, that was injured in Rafah, and she was admitted in our field hospital in Rafah at that time in February, I think February 2024. During an airstrike, she lost her parents, both father and mother and siblings, and she was admitted in our hospital with her auntie as a caregiver, and she wake up from the surgery, and no one of us were able to tell her, to disclose that she lost her parents, she lost her siblings, and now she's an orphan. And they approached me, the team, and they know that I have mental health experience, and I can little bit disclose this to the child. I went in front of her and I looked at her, and I was frozen. I couldn't say to her that I couldn't disclose this information to her. And she's a beautiful young girl, blonde. It was rare in Gaza, and she doesn't know that her father and mother and siblings died during the airstrike.
Where is she now? What's her name?
I don't remember really the name, and she's now with her auntie, but I don't know where, because we were obliged in May to evacuate as well our field hospital in Rafah. We had a field hospital that we were obliged to evacuate it when the ground operation started in Rafah.
Okay, well, I'm being told we're out of time, but we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us, and we wish you and your family all the very best. Thank you for your time. Dr. Mohammed Abu Mughisib, thank you very much again. Well, we can speak now to Mick Mulroy, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East and the Pentagon's former top policy official for the Middle East under President Trump. But thank you very much indeed for joining us, Mick. Always a pleasure talking to you. We were just speaking there to a doctor from MSF who is speaking to us from Gaza. I mean, painting a really apocalyptic picture of what the situation is now like there. What's the reaction in the United States, just sort of really on a general level, to the scenes that we're all seeing on our television screens of what's happening in Gaza?
Good to be with you, Tom. I think, of course, I can't speak for the entirety of the U.S., but I think it's fair to characterize that the U.S. public, both sides of the aisle, are getting more and more concerned about the humanitarian crisis that exists in Gaza right now. And with this announcement that Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu, intends to occupy the entirety of Gaza, which would also include Gaza City, a population of about 900,000 would have to be moved. It's likely that this crisis could get even worse. I think that's something that the public, of course, and certainly those in Washington are looking at very closely.
I mean, hardly a day goes by when there isn't serious condemnation and action, in some cases, from some of America's top allies directly relating to the situation in Gaza, whether it's Norway's sovereign wealth fund divesting from Israel, whether it's Australia accusing the Prime Minister of Israel of being in denial about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And most recently, the Saudi government has condemned what's happening in Gaza. How much of that condemnation do you think is filtering back to the United States? And is it changing anything?
Well, I think for the United States, when they see key allies like the ones you just mentioned, in addition, Germany has cut off providing security assistance to Israel. Germany was the biggest proponent of Israel inside the EU, and I think it's second highest when it comes to providing weapons and munitions. So I think all of this does impact how the U.S. sees the conflict in Gaza. Again, it's not a monolith. Obviously, the U.S. is very divergent in its opinions. But I think there's still strong support, of course, for Israel to fight back against Hamas and certainly defend itself and prevent any future October 7th. But the way that this has been carried out when it comes to the civilian population, the restriction of food coming in to Gaza, and the potential for this to continue is causing quite a bit of alarms, if you will, in the United States. And I think it's important to point out, it's not just in the United States. The Israeli population, at least the polls that I've seen, would like to see this conflict come to an end. And the IDF, all the way up to the top, the chief of staff, Samir, has, he might as well have come out publicly. There's so many leaks coming out of the IDF that says they're very concerned about how this a new phase, this full occupation of Gaza will happen, and then what it'll mean for the IDF, because it certainly is going to be a very, very difficult military problem that's going to cost the lives of a lot of soldiers. It might increase the risk to the hostages that are still, in captivity, and of course, the humanitarian crisis it's likely to cause is going to be intense. So there's I think opposition, not just around the world, which is clear, inside the United States from both sides, and now I think inside Israel. And that might be what the pressure that really needs to be put to bear on the Prime Minister's office.
Indeed. I mean, we've been hearing about a fracture, quite a serious fracture between the Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz and the country's military chief, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir. And that's just one of the fractures. But there is this sense in the world that, the United States stands absolutely by Israel at this particular moment, not showing any signs of changing tack. And there is the perception that one man in the world could put a stop to this tomorrow if he wanted to, and that person is President Trump. Do you agree with that?
I think it's a simplification. Obviously, but the last administration, this administration, I think, in the United States would like to see a ceasefire, would like to see an end to the conflict. It depends on how you see that pressure being laid out or whether they can actually make it so. Is the U.S. going to cut off all security assistance to Israel? No. Why? Because, one, we're a good partner and a long time, and I think we'll be a continuous partner of Israel. There's still a big threat from Iran. And so I don't see that being a leverage point that either side of the political spectrum in the United States is willing to use. So then the question just comes to just basically diplomatic pressure, not the security assistance. And I think that the U.S. believes it's put pressure on Israel, going back to the Biden administration and now the Trump administration, maybe to a lesser extent now. But it really hasn't had an effect. It looked like Prime Minister Netanyahu is only influenced by the far right of his security cabinet. That's what keeps him in power. It's clear that a lot, if not a majority, of the Israeli population wants to see a negotiated into this and the hostages come home and the conflict to stop. And that doesn't seem to have an influence on him. And as you already mentioned, and so did I, Lieutenant General Zamir is his chosen senior military advisor and the chief of staff of the IDF. And his opposition to this plan doesn't seem to have any sway on the prime minister. So I guess the question is, what is it other than the far right of his cabinet that really has any influence over whether he will end this conflict?
Are you concerned, as someone who obviously is closely interested and involved in US foreign policy, about lasting damage? I mean, not to Israel's standing, because that's not particularly your concern directly, but also to the United States standing because of its perceived unconditional support for Israel?
So I think it could, certainly have an effect on how others view us. That shouldn't drive necessarily U.S. foreign policy, but it should be part of the calculation and the decisions we make. I think the U.S., and I do believe it's correct, will continue to support Israel's right to be a country and live safely and free from attacks, whether those attacks are from Hamas, Hezbollah, or Iran. I'm a firm believer that that is where the U.S. needs to be. It's in our interest. It's in the interest of the region. And I think if we can get this conflict to an end, then that part of the discussion, whether it's expanding the Abraham Accords, increasing economic opportunities, and certainly rebuilding Gaza and heading toward a real two-state solution, not just one that people reference almost as a throwaway line, I think that's in the interest of the entire region. If I was advising Israel, I certainly would suggest they take a different tack, particularly when it comes to the humanitarian assistance going into Gaza. Innocent civilians should never be restricted from food, clean water, and medicine. That's a right, and it is against all conventions, UN conventions and otherwise, to do anything other than that. But this is something they're going to have to make their decision, and it could have long-term consequences on their standing. But I think the Israeli people know. I think it's important to point out that having an opposition to Prime Minister Netanyahu's policies shouldn't equate to being opposed to Israel writ large, and certainly not Israelis writ large. I mean, the U.S. is very divergent. We have different political parties in power. It doesn't mean that every American agrees to it one way or the other. And I think that should hold true with the Israelis as well.
You mentioned the Abraham Accords, and something we can assume, and I'm sure we'll agree on, is that President Trump would like to see the Abraham Accords expanded during his second, and we assume final term in office at the White House. But isn't this conflict in Gaza and the treatment of the people in Gaza making it an impossibly difficult task for any regional leader to sell to their population the notion of normalizing ties with a country like Israel, which is starving men, women, and children to death?
Yes, it definitely makes this likelihood of expanding the Abraham Accords. And I agree with you, Tom. The Trump administration's one of their biggest touted achievements in the first administration was the Abraham Accords. So they'd love to see it expanded, but we're nowhere close to that happening, particularly with the conflict that's still going on. But if you look at the plan that just came out with Saudi Arabia, with France, I think they're calling it the New York Declaration. It was a meeting that happened at the end of July in New York. There is a way to a path that would lead to the reconstruction of Gaza, an integration of the Palestinian populations that would be led obviously not by Hamas, but by a selected technocratic type government that could then lead us to a path to a two-state solution, which could then, I think, add to the Abraham Accords. Until all those things happen, I agree with your premise of your question. It's very unlikely it's just going to expand, certainly not with the current situation.
We've heard Prime Minister Netanyahu saying, really since the 7th of October 2023, that the battle will continue until Hamas is defeated. And yet we're in a situation where it's actually very easy for Hamas to recruit more fighters. I mean, it's not difficult in these circumstances to persuade teenage boys, perhaps 16, 17-year-olds who've got nothing to lose other than to sign up for the Al-Qassam Brigade. So aren't we looking at a situation where this is just, it's like going up an escalator the wrong way?
And those are essentially political statements that really, I think, challenge military leaders, because it's essentially impossible to destroy a philosophy. So if your status of success is there is literally nobody else left calling themselves Hamas, it'll never happen. You're creating a military objective that's impossible to fill. You can deplete their ability to wage war against Israel, obviously something that they're doing and have done. You can eliminate the leadership. You can reduce the tunnels. You can certainly destroy most of their significant weapon systems. But trying to say that you're going to get to a point where nobody's going to be recruited into Hamas or any terrorist organization has not proven to be a realistic objective in the last, thousands of years of conflict, and certainly in the last 2 decades in the global war on terrorism. If anything, we've expanded the actual memberships in terrorist organizations. But nations have to defend themselves, but they also need to set realistic goals that the military intelligence services can actually meet.
Just as we approach the end of this discussion, Mick, I mean, where are we? Are we seeing any signs that diplomatic progress could be around the corner? I mean, we've got reports that the Hamas leader, Khalil al-Hayya, is due in Cairo for talks. The idea there being to revive a US-backed ceasefire plan. Are there talks taking place, indirect talks? Is there any progress being made? What are your thoughts?
Tom, if you want to look at the glass half full, some would say that the announcement, of course, to do a full occupation, but then giving it about several months up to, I'm hearing in October at some time, before it actually fully kicks off, might be a diplomatic and negotiation tactic so that they can see this huge event coming, and it would put more pressure on Hamas to accept the offer on the table. And it's clear that Egypt and Qatar have not given up on pushing for a proposal that's amenable to both sides. So hopefully that is accurate, and those that believe this is the case are correct, and we can get to a negotiated end to the conflict, at least to a ceasefire, where hostages can come out safely, where humanitarian assistance can come in at scale with enough to feed the entire population and reduce the level of suffering substantially, of course, in Gaza, and get into a path where this conflict doesn't start again. So I think there is a path toward it. You can see some of the evidence that is actually what Israel wants and potentially what Hamas wants. We should, as an international community, do everything we can to make that happen.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Mick Mulroy, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for the Middle East. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Now, in other news, European leaders are voicing concerns just days ahead of a US-Russia summit in Alaska, warning against redrawing Ukraine's borders by force. Well, their fears stem from reports that the US may grant territorial concessions in Ukraine. Well, President Trump has suggested a peace deal could see Russia taking the entire Donbas region in eastern Ukraine and keeping Crimea as well. And that's raising alarm over possible legal recognition of Russian control. Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Sir Gerald Howarth, who is a former UK Defence Minister and former UK Minister for International Security Strategy, who joins us from Suffolk in the United Kingdom. Sir Gerald, thank you very much indeed for being with us. As always, a pleasure. We're also joined from Chicago by Greg Swenson, who is the chair of Republicans Overseas. Both of you, thank you very much indeed for your time. Greg, let me start by asking you. President Trump has insisted that any peace deal would have to involve some swapping of territories. In your opinion, should Ukraine give up sovereign territory in the interest of ending this war?
Tom, good question. And I don't blame President Zelensky for refusing to acknowledge that. And the question is, what kind of compromises have to be made? I think ultimately there might have to be, but I would hope, we all want Ukraine to stay exactly as it is or as it was prior to 2014. It's just the question is that realistic? And what's the alternative if that's proposed and then Putin says no and walks away?
OK, so Gerald, let me turn to you. You've written a letter in the Daily Telegraph. It was published yesterday. You say President Trump cannot be allowed to betray Ukraine in his desperation for a deal. In your opinion, Sir Gerald, should Ukraine give up anything at all?
Well, good afternoon, Tom. Not a square inch, no. And I'm surprised to hear Greg talking of that kind of compromise. It was his President Bill Clinton, who alongside Prime Minister John Major of the United Kingdom in 1995 signed the Budapest Memorandum, under which Ukraine gave up its entire arsenal of nuclear weapons, in return for which it's the parties there too, Russia under Boris Yeltsin, United States under Bill Clinton, and United Kingdom under John Major, nobody else. But those three agreed to respect the sovereignty, independence, and existing borders of Ukraine. Of course, Russia's complete breach of that agreement, which the former leader of Russia signed. And now it appears that the President of the United States is going to flagrantly breach that agreement. I think it is very, very dangerous indeed. It sets a very dangerous precedent. And of course, ultimately, if land is to be ceded to Russia, who thinks that Putin will stop there? He wants to seize the whole of Ukraine, does not believe that Ukraine is a sovereign nation. He believes that it should be part of Russia. We are entering a very, very dangerous period.
OK, Greg, let me ask you to respond to that and also to ask you what you think would be an acceptable exchange if an exchange is to take place at all.
Yeah, I don't know what the acceptable exchange of land would be, because it's quite natural to suggest that there shouldn't be any. And that's why I don't disagree with Sir Howarth. And I do think that, but I do think we have to be realistic. And the commitment that was made in 1995 was surely directed around nuclear capabilities or use of nuclear weapons, which, although that threat is always there, I don't think it's a realistic threat that Putin will use those weapons. But he does have 45 nuclear warheads. And then, of course, we have to consider that the first breach was in 2008, not with Ukraine, but specifically with Georgia. But then in 2014, when I suppose you could argue that Barack Obama should have honored that 1995 agreement, and apparently he did not. And there was, that might have been a time for sticking to the letter of the law. But I think there was appeasement in the Obama term. There surely was some appeasement in the Biden term. It's interesting that the only time Putin didn't aggressively take land in the last 2 decades was when Trump was president in his first term. So I don't know what to expect on Friday, but I do think that we just have to be open-minded. And as the president said, he might find out in the first 2 minutes if Putin's even serious. The reason Putin is at the table is because of the threats of significant economic sanctions. And that's something that President Trump was not afraid to do during his first term. He was very hostile to Putin in his first term, but that you know, the time for deterrence was then. I'm not sure if it might be too late for deterrence. And I think because of the past appeasement from several presidents, I think we're in a different situation now.
Okay, so Gerald, let me turn back to you. First of all, feel free to pick up on anything Greg has said. And what do you think President Trump's options are on Friday?
Well, I'm just very disappointed to hear everything he's said so far. He has basically hit Zelensky and Ukraine by refusing at one point to supply weapons. He has prevaricated throughout his presidency. He was unbelievably offensively rude to President Zelensky when he came to the White House. We know that Donald Trump is a maverick, but that was way beyond anything acceptable in diplomatic behavior. And of course, whilst he is prevaricating, he's imposed no sanctions upon Putin, calls him by his Christian name. And meanwhile, Putin is just building up his attack on Russia. I've just been reading a moment ago that Russia has made a further breakthrough in the Donbass. Of course, what Putin is doing, he's playing for time, as he has done throughout this president's presidency. He's playing for time, trying to grab as much land as possible, and then he will demand to keep that land. I'm sorry, Greg, but you're part of the appeasement process. I'm wearing a Falkland Islands T-shirt at the moment because I went out there 20 years after the Falklands campaign with a number of veterans. We lost 242 men in the Falklands campaign, but it was our determination, the determination of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, that the illegal invasion undertaken by President Galtieri of Argentina should be resisted. Of course, at the time, the United States was ambivalent because of its support for its fellows in the American continent. But Margaret Thatcher stood firm. We recovered the land, and the message that sent out to the rest of the world was, do not mess with us. It sent that message out not just to Argentina, but to tyrants around the world. So on Friday, unless your president takes firm action, stands by the Budapest Memorandum, that commitment to respect the existing borders of Ukraine as they were in 1995, what he will be doing is sending a clear message that the green light, you're quite right, the green light shown in 2008 and in 2014 when Putin invaded Crimea and annexed that Ukrainian territory, he was sending out a message, the green light is still on and you can go and do as you will in the rest of Europe. Moldova, watch out. The Baltic states, watch out. Even Poland, watch out. This is really serious business. And unfortunately, we have a president who seems not to understand history, who is ignorant in the way he has accused Ukraine of starting the war when manifestly it was the invasion by Russia. These are serious times, and it's time for the United States, I'm afraid, to be absolutely ruthlessly firm. Putin is weakened by what is happening economically in his country, but he is determined to rebuild the Soviet Union. He's never made any secret about that. And it is time, I'm afraid, for us to stand firm.
Greg, let me ask you to respond to that. What Sir Gerald is saying is that we need some Thatcherite determination here, not give an inch, because if we do, President Putin will be taking a lot more than that.
Yeah, I think history has been very good to Mrs. Thatcher about the Falklands. And I think that was a brief moment where perhaps President Reagan and Mrs. Thatcher weren't on the same page. And that's unfortunate because in retrospect, it was a brilliant thing, a brilliant defense of British sovereignty. And I think we all agree that Putin is the wild card here. Putin is a bad guy. President Trump was very hostile to Putin in his first term. You saw that with sending Javelin missiles after, Biden and Obama were sending blankets and ready to eat meals, with unmarked commercial trucks. They would ship those non-lethal materials to a U.S. airbase in Poland. They were just so afraid of provoking Putin, and then shipped that material on commercial trucks to Kyiv. Trump came in day one, put sanctions on Nord Stream 2. He called out Putin for killing his own citizens in 1999. 3 prior presidents had the same information from the CIA and chose to bury it. So look, I think the president's got a good track record of standing up to Putin. The problem is during the Biden term, Biden took the sanctions off of Nord Stream 2, for example, day one. So the appeasement's already happened. And what President Trump doesn't have the capability of doing is sending American troops. That's just not going to fly politically. There's no support for that, or very little support for that. And it's the same reason the Europeans haven't sent troops. So I think the president is willing to continue sending supplies, military support. He has done that. He's tried to use it maybe as kind of a carrot for Ukraine. This is not an easy process. It's surely not President Trump's war. He inherited that from the last administration. So I think we just have to keep an open mind. I don't know what to expect, but we might be surprised that the president is able to negotiate something credible. And that's by no means does that mean he's going to sell out on Ukraine. That's not the point here.
Okay, so Gerald, what we heard there is that President Trump has a track record of being tough on President Putin. Your response to that, and just a practicality, I'm wondering to myself, can the US president actually cede Ukrainian territory to Russia on Kyiv's behalf? Is that even, from a practical point of view, an option?
Well, it's deeply offensive that the president should think that he can cede somebody else's land. And in fairness, listening to what he was saying yesterday, he said it's not for him to decide, although he has given the impression up till now that it is very much a deal to be done between him and President Putin. And I find this transactional nature, as though it's some kind of property deal, also pretty offensive as well. This is high stakes international politics where the security, not just of Europe, but the entire free world is at risk. And when Greg says that President Trump has been standing up to Putin and got a good track record, I'm afraid you're wrong. He hasn't. He's done very little. To the extent that he's resumed now the supply of weaponry, only on the basis that that is to be paid for by the European members of NATO. And don't forget that he's been ambivalent about NATO as well, which is deeply, deeply damaging. And the Kremlin watches all this stuff. He is a maverick. He is unpredictable. And to the extent that he is well known to be unpredictable, perhaps my fears about Friday are unfounded, and I very much hope they are. But on past record, I'm afraid I'm extremely pessimistic. But I think at the end of the day, to Greg, I would just say this, I quite understand the practicalities of trying to recover the land that's been brutally seized by this tyrant. But the fact is, if we do not recover that land and restore it to Ukraine, watch out, because this man will not stop here. Read his speech of July 2021, when he set out his ambition to rebuild the Soviet Union. Because don't forget, Russia's leaders feel deeply hurt that Russia is no longer the power that it was. They are throwing their weight around. There's nothing that Russia produces that any of us wants to buy. We don't want to buy their refrigerators. We don't want to buy their cars. The only thing they've got is oil and minerals. And on that note, if land is ceded in the Donbass area and the Sea of Azov becomes completely Russian dominated, so does the mineral resources in the Sea of Azov become Russian, as well as a large part of the Black Sea. This is really, really serious stuff. And it's time for the United States, not only the most powerful nation in the world, but the leader of the free world. You are the leader of us all. You know London, Greg. You know that this transatlantic relationship is absolutely vital. And if we don't stand firm, the message this is going to send to President Xi of the People's Republic of China, who has his sights firmly set on annexing Taiwan, to Tehran and other capitals around the world, other tyrants, the message this is going to send is going to be, we're okay, we can get on with it. We won't be challenged. So, as I say, it's with a pretty heavy heart. I'm pretty despairing.
Greg, let me ask you, what your thoughts are on what Sir Gerald has said, and what you make of the argument that any concession is essentially a reward to President Putin for his actions and a step towards the reconstruction of something resembling the Soviet Union.
Yeah, it's a shame. I think, again, we all agree that President Putin is a bad guy, and he has not behaved well for decades now. And I think even his speech at the Munich Security Conference back in 2007 or 8 should have been a great warning to the West. And so there's been appeasement, not necessarily by President Trump, but there's been appeasement in the West on Putin for years now. And so it's kind of an odd time to decide to roll up our sleeves and defend Ukraine 3 years later. Now, Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs for President Biden, sat down with the president and told him 2 years ago that the Ukrainians were brave. They defended Kyiv. They managed to keep Putin from taking over the country. Good for them. But now it's a stalemate. Now's the time to negotiate. Now, his counterpart in Ukraine said the same thing to Zelensky. Of course, he was fired. Biden did not fire Mark Milley. He just ignored him on that. So, look, it's just an odd time to decide that we now must defend Ukraine, whether that means boots on the ground. I have not seen any European allies volunteer to do that. And on NATO, President Trump really cares about NATO. NATO is going to end up being stronger because of President Trump. Perhaps it was the Ukraine invasion that also inspired the NATO countries to increase spending, but there's no doubt that President Trump was very important in that. And NATO is looking to be much stronger thanks to what President Trump has been saying since 2017.
So, Gerald, would you like to comment on that?
Well, it is true. I concede that it's true that as a result of President Trump's firmness on this particular subject, European members of NATO have decided to step up to the plate. They were warned by David Cameron at the 2014 summit. David Cameron, former British Prime Minister, the NATO summit in Wales. In 2014, that they had to divvy up because the American taxpayer should not have to assume such a large proportion of the burden of NATO's costs as it has done since 1945. And President Trump in his first administration gave the same message. So it came as no surprise. But look, Greg, I do urge you to look at what's being said here. What Mark Rutte is not a nutter. He's not extreme right wing. He's the Secretary General of NATO, former Dutch Prime Minister. He is talking about the threat of war from Russia. The leader of the British Army, General Sir Ronnie Walker, saying the same thing. His predecessor, General Sir Patrick Sanders, saying the same thing. This is very serious territory, and we have your president, who I'm afraid has done nothing to put sanctions. Serious sanctions on Putin, has done nothing practical apart from belatedly giving some weapons paid for by the Europeans to Ukraine. And he risks giving another green light to Putin. And please note that the warnings given by people who are not extremists and understand that the United States itself will be drawn into some conflict if it is allowed to happen. And you say that the time to deal with Russia was in 2008 or 2014, and it's too late now. Well, appease him now, and it'll be even worse.
Greg, I want to ask you, the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has said that peace should be built with Ukraine, not imposed upon it. Do you think President Trump is listening to his allies? And do you think President Trump is going to go into that meeting on Friday taking into account the opinions of the Europeans, who, by the way, have now paid more towards the Ukrainian war effort than the Americans have?
Sure, and they should be paying more toward that effort. Obviously, it's the European backyard, so that makes that makes total sense to me. I think the president will listen to the allies. He's not afraid to pivot if he thinks circumstances have changed. He's already done that on Ukraine a few times. I mean, he is the wild card here again is Putin. We all agree on that. Nobody's endorsing. If you're a skeptic of the war or you advocate for peace and you're an anti-war president, which this president is, that doesn't make him a Putin sympathizer. It didn't make him a sympathizer when he signed off on 300 Russian mercenaries being killed in Syria by American troops. It didn't make him a Putin sympathizer, again, when he called out Putin for 1999. He sent Javelin missiles. He put sanctions on Nord Stream 2. This is a president who's not afraid to use force. But unfortunately, since the Obama administration, the U.S. is not capable of fighting a two-front war. He's been very clear about the pivot to Asia. We have to have that capability to fight a full war against China if necessary. Nobody wants that, but it is not time for a two-front war. So that's what he's trying to avoid. If the Europeans step up, good for them. Nobody wants to see body bags, but I do think this president is willing to negotiate. He uses economics and trade. He put massive threats of tariffs on India, which is not good for America, not good for trade, but he's willing to do that, or at least threaten that, putting massive tariffs on India because they're buying Russian oil. The Europeans bought $22 billion of Russian oil last year. That's post-invasion. That's more than they've given to Ukraine. So they're funding both sides of the war right now. The president called out the Germans on this in 2018, just like Reagan did in 1981. So there's a lot of moving parts here. The president would rather use the threats of tariffs or trade or non-tariff trade barriers as a way to get people to the table. I think he'll try that here. It might not work because Putin is not completely sane, but I do think that he was willing to try. He's ended 5 perhaps regional conflicts already since he took office. And he does that peace through deterrence, peace through strength, but also peace through business and trade. So I would just keep an open mind to what we could expect. And by the way, to an earlier question, no, the president is not imposing anything on Zelensky. He doesn't have the power to do that. He's just trying to bring people together to talk about peace. Again, it's not his war. He didn't start this thing. He's inherited it. He just wants to give peace a chance, to quote John Lennon. So, I'm surprised the Democrats haven't been more anti-war on this, but it's kind of shown the new realignment politically. But again, the president's not afraid to use force for the right cause.
Okay, so Gerald, your thoughts on that and giving peace a chance?
Well, give peace a chance. And I do not pray for peace. I pray for victory. Every night I pray for victory for Ukraine. I've been there twice recently, Greg. I suggest you go there, have a look for yourself, look at the cemeteries. These are people to whom we gave an agreement in return for their giving up that arsenal of nuclear weapons. And imagine if they hadn't given up that arsenal of nuclear weapons. Do you think Putin would have risked this? Of course he wouldn't. But now they took their armor off, and because they were given an assurance by your president, by my prime minister, by the leader of the Russian Federation, and 2 of you are reneging on it. Only the United Kingdom is continuing to stand firm. And I think that is something of which you, in America, really ought to be ashamed. It's not a question of giving peace a chance. It's a question of dealing with a brutal aggressor. He hasn't been taking out military targets. You've seen on the television, he's been taking out blocks of flats, residential blocks, children's schools,
Gerald,
hospitals.
We understand that. He's firing at civilians all the time. No one is defending Putin here. The question is...
Well, you've got to do something about it, Greg. You have to do something about it. We can't just sit there saying, oh, well, we'll have to do some sort of a deal. We'll have to, let's all sit around the table and seek peace. This man doesn't want peace. What he wants is Ukraine. He wants the whole lot of Ukraine. He's made that perfectly clear. Don't you understand that?
Of course, I understand that. I've said that several times. And so the question is, do you think that there'd be political support in the United Kingdom for the UK military to be on the ground in Ukraine, to have boots on the ground, to have young British soldiers dying for Ukraine? And I might be wrong on that. I don't think there's that political support in the United Kingdom. So I don't know what you're advocating besides our economic and military support for Ukraine, which we've been doing since 2022, and it hasn't really worked.
Well, hold on,
so
Greg.
I'm not sure what the next step is.
You say you've been doing it since 2022. No, you haven't. You've prevaricated. Not under this administration, under the Biden administration. He prevaricated over F-16s. He prevaricated over air defense.
Right.
Pardon?
You're right. That incrementalism was perhaps a mistake, to sort of drip
Perhaps
feed.
it was a massive mistake. I said it on day one. We should be in that. We've been training Ukrainian troops since 2016 in the United Kingdom. Yeah. Not just since 2022, since 2016. We have, to a certain extent, seen this coming, although God knows what our diplomats were doing when Putin made that speech in July 2021. But what we needed to do on day one and did not do was to give them weapons. We gave them NMOR, the man-portable anti-tank missile. That saved Kyiv. You in the United States prevaricated. The Continentals prevaricated. You have to step up. Mike Pompeo said at the Odessa Black Sea Security Forum, which I attended the month before last, few weeks ago, Mike Pompeo said we have to give them the weapons. Okay. Mike Pompeo is a former Secretary of State for your Republican Party, our sister party in the United States.
I know Mike.
Yeah, well, Mike Pompeo is saying that. And Admiral Hewitt, who was a great guy, spent a lot of time. He takes that view. You have got to give them the weapons to defeat this deplorable, brutal aggressor.
So, Gerald, we're going to give you you've had the last word there because I'm being told we're out of time. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us, and we really got quite intense there in the final minutes of the discussion. But really appreciate you both sharing the time and the energy to discuss this important issue. So, Gerald Howarth, former UK Defence Minister, and Greg Swenson, Chair of Republicans Overseas. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Sir Gerald.
Well, that is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for more exclusive interviews. Until then, bye-bye.